So our next speaker, Elana Freeland, has done, outside the deep state, she's probably done more research into the electromagnetic aspect of this war. And it is a war. We can see the chemtrails, but we don't see necessarily the electromagnetic stuff that gets pulsed through us. We have, Brad mentioned HAARP, there's NexRad, there's Gwen, we've got the 5G stuff coming along, and it is really, really insidious. We are electromagnetic beings, and electromagnetic waves mess with not only our brains, but our nervous systems, our muscles. It's really, really, really creepy. And Elana's book, Chemtrails, HAARP, and the Full Spectrum Dominance of Planet Earth. You can get this on Amazon. And come on up, and you can speak about the new one as well. So I'll pull up your thing. Okay, so you can use this.
So then I just do.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone.
All right, give it up for Elana.
Again? So this is the cover of the book that will be out in January. What I've done is I've put together a picture of not just weather, but all the different operations that are now served by weather engineering and the ionizing of our atmosphere. And that's phase 2. This is, I'll talk about it, but basically what we're looking at here, the ring around planet Earth will be composed of the chemicals, very similar signature that we are breathing now every day. So this is about control over the Earth, surveillance, down to the DNA level. And it's also about solar system communication for various crafts that will now be going around the solar system. So this is what the book is about. The final book I'll write is on synthetic biology, and I'm beginning that now. I've got my files ready, I'm ready to go. And I will be looking again, as I did in the first book, Chemtrails, HAARP, at Morgellons, and transhumanism, various neurobiological studies, and what it means to have an entire planet of people who can serve as guinea pigs. So today, I'm going to, as I'm known for, I'm heavy on research. I want to show you the big picture of how many things are connected to this ionized atmosphere that we're breathing. And I'd like to begin with a small sermon. I apologize, but I have a captive audience, and so there are a few things I'd like to say to you about our situation, which seems dire, and for some people is absolutely frightening. I don't feel fear. I feel committed, and it is entirely about the preservation of life on Earth, nature, and human consciousness on the human scale, not a machine scale. So it is a spiritual war, as Brad indicated, and it's all hands on deck now. Each of us is a scientist. Each of us is now exploring what is occurring in front of our perceptions, and that's what I want to address. We are living in strange science fiction times, issues upon which the future welfare of the Earth and its peoples hinge are marginalized now as conspiracy theory, and scientists and doctors who step forward to sound the alarm are discredited, ostracized, or killed. High-tech research is dominated by military and defense corporation grant monies, compartmentalization and need-to-know security clearance, and non-disclosure agreements signed in blood, while the good old boy peer review system plays gatekeeper. Despite the mis and disinformation that must be waded through, the internet is our only town square and university, all wrapped in one for researchers like me, probing beneath the national security shroud thrown over full-spectrum dominance technologies coming online daily at a pace that defies reason. What university could one turn to for the kind of information we need in order to comprehend what the national security state is up to, especially now that universities have been militarized? My work is to frame the context of how all the pieces fit together and what they say about the future already here. Like the Egyptian myth of Isis and Osiris that Freemasons are so fond of, the body parts of an ancient global dream become nightmare, lie scattered over the internet, awaiting our ability to piece it all together and interpret what has been hidden from we the people. The way our minds work is to first compartmentalize issues in order to concentrate on them one by one. Our next effort must be to discern if and how the separate issues are connected, possibly by a common intent behind them. For example, how CERN, ionospheric heaters, and wind turbines are calibrated by artificial intelligence to work together. The issues that goad us to act beyond our personal lives are simply separate battlefields in a vast spiritual war for the future of humanity and the definition of life itself. Extreme weather, vaccinations, GMOs, water quality, immune system degeneration, dying animal species, acid oceans, alkalinized soil, mind control, and targeting are all occurring simultaneous with the moral degeneration of society, the death of the middle-class dream, the rise of Agenda 2030, artificial intelligence, neuroscience, and transhumanism. All are parts of the elite Luciferian dream known as globalism. Geoengineering the Earth's atmosphere is not just about weather, wireless communication, drones, and directed energy weapons. It is about aiding in the breakdown of the immune system so that the human being and all of life on Earth can be genetically altered. From here on out, we must learn to think in big picture terms. All right. Let's see. Give me a place to stand. I don't think it's working, this one. Can I just use this one, Patrick? Give me a place to stand and I shall move the earth. This is what Archimedes said, 2,700 years ago, 2,500 years ago. What did he mean? Well, he was talking about levering the earth, but how does it compare with what Tesla said? I wanted to illuminate the whole earth around the equator as a ring around it. So what we have is, again, a very large dream on the part of the elite, and it is moving forward very fast. I'm going to have to find a way to do this. Wait. Okay. Between Two Ages. This is Zbigniew Brzezinski's book in 1976. He's one of the men behind the curtain who, for decades, was tasked by the Council on Foreign Relations to handle various presidents, Democrat and Republican, but mostly Democrat. We are now living inside an ionized atmosphere. So what is geoengineering really up to? This is from a series. I don't have a TV, but it played for 2 years, I believe, Under the Dome. And the picture of it living inside a dome is very apt for us. And this would be, as Brad said, part of pre-programming us. This is what our world would look like now if we could see the Wi-Fi that we're so fond of for our cell phone activities and all of our wireless communications. If I were looking behind the wireless situation, I would see something like this on a military level. Aircraft carrier, unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs here, there, troops, microwave units, radar units, NEXRADs, etc. This is really an electromagnetic era that we live in. Weather, warfare, environment modification, and I like this quote, which I've taken from Sylvain Henry. Cirrus clouds are the thermostats of the climate. The thermostat can now be regulated by man, and countries of the world are fighting to control that thermostat. And that really is behind a lot of the military or saber rattling that we see on the Earth today. This is from the executive summary of HAARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project, that is very notorious, has a fantastic acronym that we find ourselves not wanting to let go of, even though HAARP now is only one of many, many ionospheric heaters. It has been recalibrated, but it gave the military intelligence very much information about how to ionize, how to turn our atmosphere into a mini ionosphere. So this is mainly history. We hear about the silly term chemtrails. Well, it came from the military. The first place that it was seen was in this executive summary. You can see at the bottom, it says patent number, blah, blah. It has also been proposed to release large clouds of barium in the magnetosphere so that photoionization will increase the cold plasma density, thereby producing the electron precipitation through enhanced Whistler mode interaction. And then it says barium is the second most common chemtrail ingredient. The other place that we find it is in the U.S. Air Force Academy Chemical Manual. So I just wanted to remind us of that we do not need to be apologetic about using a military term for the chemical trails in the sky. Here I have I'm not sure how to do this. Oh, I'm not.
Hit the play button.
Oh, it's hit the play button?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Down on the bottom right, you scroll over.
On the keyboard?
I saw it on the screen when you have the. There it is.
Thank you. So this too is, for the people here, probably no one needs this, but let's just look at it. What we see is chemical trails, and then you're going to see a small so-called contrail higher in the sky in a moment. And just to be clear of the difference between them, this is chemicals coming out of the, whether you think of it as a tanker with a separate system, or you think of it as coming out of the combustion chamber of a jet engine, it is very different from the little tiny above there contrail. Here's our skies. I do remember the deep blue skies of yesteryear. And today we mainly have the ones after, that says after. Climate mafia, all the decals of the various agencies involved in this operation. And recently, geoengineers are redefining clouds to include those created with chemicals and radio frequency and microwave heat. Whole new species of clouds are magically appearing in our anthropogenically engineered skies. And I'm going to try to say all these. They have wonderful Latin names. Stratocumulus volatus, undulatus, altocumulus stratiformis, translucidus perlucidus undulatus, capillatus, flammagenitus. Flammagenitus are clouds from forest fires. Stratus cataracta genitus, that's water spray from power plants. Fluctus, those are Kelvin-Helmholtz waves, and of course, 5 species of Cirrus contralis, or otherwise known as cirrus, made from contrails. And those 5 types are uncinus, fibratus, castellanus, flocus, and spisatus. So it would seem like just more scientific hubris and Latin word games if it weren't for the fact that the natural world is being redefined in the image geoengineers and their handlers decide. We go back to 2000 when independent scientist Clifford Carnicom was looking at the amazing cloud trails, chemtrails left in the northern New Mexico deep blue skies and how they would turn into cirrus contralis. And here he says, as early as 2000, 17 years ago, that these were synthetic clouds. And he was very acutely aware because he believed in his perceptions. We are, of course, being pre-programmed to not believe in our perceptions. But here he says that it's been suspect because of the unusual textures observed. The patterns and textures referred to have frequently been described as cottage cheese or tortoise shell by some observers. And again, we must believe in our perceptions if we are to understand what is taking place in front of our eyes. Now, I think that the cloud masters are going to have to add some other clouds. This would be perhaps I don't know it in Latin, but a barium-lithium cloud, a square cloud, a Godzilla cloud, and a UFO obscured behind a plasma cloud. Here is the famous HAARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project. It's still up there. It's under the University of Alaska Fairbanks now. But as I said, all universities have been militarized, and so I'm sure it's still a military intelligence program. But it is not it is recalibrated to work with many, many other ionospheric heaters, many of which are now mobile and small. This just to remind you from probably science that you had in high school. Our troposphere is very thin, and above us is the stratosphere, where a lot of military jets fly and commercial jets. The mesosphere, and finally the ionosphere. And then this would be a graphic that kind of talks about how the ionospheric heater works. It bounces energy off of the ionosphere and can then steer it to various parts. So whether it's being used as a weapon or to divert a weather system. This is, you can see here the submarine communications. That's the ionosphere is also used for that, bouncing them off. And the looking for oil under the ground and tomography, or other buried targets, military installations underground, etc. Very useful for military. Here, this is just one article from the Journal of Geophysical Research from 2013 regarding looking at how the HAARP and other ionospheric heaters work. extremely low frequency, very low frequency radio waves, ionospheric high frequency heating facilities generate ELF, VLF waves via modulated heating of the lower ionosphere. And this is how the science works and how the atmosphere has to be heated, whether you're talking about building a snowstorm or an ice storm with softball-sized hail, or you're talking about actual heat, 120 degree Fahrenheit summers, etc. This is the technology, the electromagnetic technology used. They're ELFs. And that's very important. You do need high frequency, but primarily we're looking at ELF waves. Inside, on the outside of the ionosphere is the huge magnetosphere, which goes, I can't remember, 20,000, 60,000 kilometers into space. Very, very large. On Earth, we have the geomagnetic field. And this geomagnetic field is crucial to us, not just to the animals, but to us. Here is one of the systems that is probably wreaking havoc on that magnetic field, that geomagnetic field of the Earth, which is the US Navy's hydroacoustic data acquisition system. And I believe that this is, you can see the wave coming from Ascension Island and being pulsed north in the Atlantic. This system is probably behind much of the problem with animals, animal disappearing. This is a little more on the hydroacoustic, just to give you a sense of it.
Powered by the Ascension Island hydroacoustic system. You see this flare of light. This is a sonic flare. It's coming up directly from that. It's heating up the clouds in the sky. You see they're actually hot. It's causing heat in the sky and in the clouds, coming down way over there. It's actually skipping off the ionosphere and coming back down. I've mentioned this in other films of mine, and it is not exactly at Palatino. And as you see, this is not as far inland as Palatino. This is an inlet from the ocean on the eastern shore of Brazil, going inland in from the inlet right here. Let me show you where that is. Right here seems to be that inlet, and they were standing up over here. And as you notice, the southern arm of the Ascension Island hydroacoustic system, that diamond is right here, just east where they said it was.
Notice it's underwater. That military installation was underwater.
The ionosphere, and being projected down from that ionosphere looks like from the International Space Station. Here is ISS capturing images. Now you see this light that is coming up to the atmosphere and stopping at the atmosphere. It's because it's being bounced from below on the ground or in the sea. It's hitting the atmosphere and it's moving the clouds. But even though it has, even though it excites the clouds and causes the clouds to part from its way, it goes back down into the atmosphere. It goes back down to the Earth. Let's see what that looks like when it hits the Antarctic. You see this area that sound energy is causing the metal particulates and the the ice and so forth to become incandescent. That sound is actually separating those clouds, just like it did when it hit the ionosphere. That's what you're seeing, the separation of those clouds. Now, why are they doing that in the Antarctic? For the same reason they're doing it to Greenland, and the same reason they're doing it to the Arctic, to melt the ice. It's all, whenever you wonder what in the world the PTB is doing, the powers that be, follow the money. Where is the money? What they're doing is, and there's documentation to this, I'll try to put this documentation in the comment, in the description of this.
That's good. Do you understand? That's one of the uses of the ionized atmosphere is it's battery ready. It's like an antenna. It's like a virtual antenna, constantly ready. As long as they keep flying the chemtrails, and as long as they keep zapping it with radio frequency, lasers, weather systems, they can use weather systems to generate energy. So this is a military operation. Military operations depend upon the atmosphere being ionized. Massive animal die-offs, yes. Navy programs. I would hold the Navy primarily culpable for animal die-offs, certainly in the ocean. Okay, normalization of the chemtrails geoengineering conspiracy theory begins as Star Wars is publicly reinstated. And what I mean by that is, yes, I'm talking about the Star Wars program of the 1980s, which was supposedly tabled back then. It was because the atmosphere was not conductive enough, and they needed to do another 10, 20 years until Bernard Eastland's patent for HAARP was available so that they could now pull energy from the ionosphere and sort of impregnate our atmosphere with those ions and then keep those ions zapped every day. So this is, we're looking at the SDI program, the Strategic Defense Initiative, the Star Wars program. Here, this was in January. I know you must have noticed that you probably hadn't heard something about geoengineering or much since the Paris conference in 2015, late 2015. But now we find out that there's good old David Keith trotted out into the press again, geoengineer David Keith, and a green light has been given for geoengineering. Truthfully, geoengineering has been going on for 20 years under Project Cloverleaf, and they're making it sound like, gee, we're going to start it right now because, gosh, we have to. It looks kind of like this. You can see the giant reflector in orbit above to mirror the heat back into space, the idea of the cirrus cloud cover, how it's going to deflect the heat, and blah, blah, blah. I'm so tired of this disinfo, misinfo, and the using of timing to make the public believe that it's new. This is very old stuff. Here's Jack Cruz, PhD. There are many scientists on the net now that I'm a little in touch with, some more than others. He often has very good things to say, Jack Cruz. And he talks about solar radiation management, which is also has the nifty title of Solar Shield now, and how it has to do with the stock market. Yes, I've covered that in the Chemtrails HAARP book, that we're looking at geoengineering derivatives, weather derivatives, and some people are making a fortune off of disasters. That's just how it is now under disaster capitalism. He talks here, he talks about digital heroin leads to people craving man-made carbohydrates, opiates, and technology. We wonder why burying the sun has led to mankind's decline, because we never sit down and put the story together in a proper sequence, and this is true. If we're constantly being lied to by the mainstream media, how exactly can we do that? Well, you know, not everybody can do what I do, 24/7 research and dig, dig, dig. Then here I wanted to go over this. Before leaving office in January 2017, the 44th president struck the word limited from the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, thus publicly reinstating the Star Wars program of 33 years ago. Republican Congressman Trent Franks, this just ran recently, by the way, December 24, 2016. Franks, who introduced and shepherded the policy changes in the House, said he drew inspiration from former President Ronald Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, known as Star Wars. So yes, this was the reinstatement of Star Wars. 18 days later, the CIA-controlled mainstream media was directed to begin normalizing covert aerial, chemical, and biological warfare research, known as geoengineering. And then once the normalizing began, NASA Space News picked up its pace. In February, this last February, increased ozone over 3.5 million square miles of the Pacific Ocean in the western US. In March, magnetized Rossby waves on the sun, making it easier to predict space weather much further in advance. Rossby waves being associated with the path of the jet stream and formation of low and high pressure systems. In April, the 2 decades of anthropogenic weather we've been experiencing was finally admitted in space science reviews. And the anthropogenic effects on the space environment started in the late 19th century, I'm quoting, and reached their peak in the 60s when high-altitude nuclear explosions were carried out by the US and the Soviet Union. These explosions created artificial radiation belts up by the Van Allen belts near Earth that resulted in major damage to satellites. Other anthropogenic impacts on the space environment include chemical release experiments since the 50s, high-frequency wave heating of the ionosphere. Even before HAARP, we had 2 other installations, one in Norway and one in Puerto Rico that were doing that. And the interaction of very low-frequency waves with the radiation belts. So this has been going on a long time. The space age began back before Kennedy, and was romanticized by Kennedy, and that romanticization was continued. But now we are deep into the space age in an electromagnetic way. This last May, NASA edged out a public announcement of a massive human-made barrier surrounding Earth, a humongous bubble we created out in space, deserving of calling for a whole new geological epoch to be named for us, the wonderful human beings who can do these things. Recently, the Van Allen probes detected something strange as they monitored the activity of charged particles caught within Earth's magnetic field. These dangerous solar discharges were being kept at bay by some kind of low-frequency barrier. A certain type of communications called VLF, very low frequency radio communications, have become far more common now than in the 60s, and the team at NASA confirmed that they can influence how and where certain particles in space move about. Well, what this barrier, this human-made barrier surrounding the Earth primarily is the space fence. This is the ring around the planet that is being formed for what I call planetary lockdown. This will be absolutely amazing for an AI-run surveillance program, and will also provide a way to communicate with vessels going throughout our solar system. So now that's that. Then something very strange happened. And the question I ask is, have the Star Wars begun? On June 17, the AMC-9 satellite in geostationary orbit 36,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface since 2003 lost contact with its Luxembourg-based SES telecommunications operator and began drifting and breaking up. Radar film footage, and I try to show it here, you can see the AMC-9, that's the satellite, the little dot in the middle. And then you see this, not very clear here, but a triangular formation. Radar film footage revealed 3 orb-like objects in triangular formation flying near the satellite with another orb aft. Media concentrated on the breakup debris, not on the possibility that this had been an actual space attack. But what happened next leads me to believe it was a space attack. But first, let's look at this. The LDAL. You see, this is put out by BAE Systems, British Air. And that's a plasma shield, otherwise once called a Tesla shield. So this is now. This is not some futuristic, gee, it'd be nice if we could build this thing. This is already happening. This is the LDAL. 13 days after the AMC-9 satellite breakup, President Trump revived the National Space Council to be led by Vice President Mike Pence, after which the massive $696 billion Star Wars National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, passed in the House of Representatives. Tucked in the bill is a proposal endorsed by the House Armed Services Committee leaders to create a Space Corps as a new military branch to stay ahead of China and Russia, of course. And this Space Corps it's in the Senate now. I don't know. Has anyone heard? Has it passed? Yes. It has, yes. I'm not surprised. I thought it would pass. So now we have the Space Corps. That's the 6th branch of the U.S. military. Everybody knows we needed another branch. And so they will be in charge of, I assume the Space Corps will be in charge of things like the Aurora. Let me see if I have, the Northrop Grumman X-47B Pegasus. Here's another one that was spotted going down Main Street in Cowley County, Kansas in 2011. And maybe even in charge of so-called UFO fleets that may just as well be phased array radar manifestations, sort of in a Project Bluebeam sort of way. So now I arrive at my list that I always bring out because it's such a valuable list. It guides me in my research. This is a list that Clifford Carnicom primarily came up with in 2005. And we have weather warfare, environment modification. That would be weather engineering. We hear a lot about that, but we hear less about the other things. And what I'm trying to say is I think we need to hear more about the other things as well. Planetary geophysical operations, electromagnetic operations, directed energy warfare operations, biological transhumanism operations, surveillance neural operations, and detection obscuration of exotic propulsion systems. So this is my guiding credo right here. Let's see. This is a very famous piece. You've probably seen it. If you look at the very bottom, it says Figure 5.2, a systems development roadmap to weather modification in 2025. This is from the Air Force document called Air Force 2025, and is actually the weather as a force multiplier, owning the weather in 2025. And all those little initials mean something, but it's important to see, there's the CBD, the carbon black dust that Brad was talking about, communications, computer modeling, aerospace delivery vehicles, directed energy, global weather network, smart clouds, like the cloud, sensors, virtual weather, etc. So it was all there. In 1996, this was created, this list. The dual use chemical electrical delivery system. It's important to know that all of our cell towers, our Gwen towers, our all the electromagnetic equipment that we use to move weather systems, all of these, including satellite appendices that are for gauging weather, measuring weather, anything weather, all of these are dual use because telecommunications corporations are all military contractors. We need to think of our cell phones in a different way. These are little transceivers that now we all carry around and can't do without, and young people are addicted to. This is a brilliant move on the parts of the powers that be. This includes the conductive nanoparticles that are coming down, the metals, the chemical plasma cloud cover, and the weather energy transfer. And the secret is it's all dual use. It can be used for civilian, it can be used for military. This is kind of cool. I mean, we all know this. We've seen these on the net, right? You can watch weather systems. But this is the high-res satellite looping. At the 16th Conference on Planned and Inadvertent Weather Modification in 2005, a paper about artificial atmospheric ionization was read. I'll just read a little bit from it while you're watching this. Galactic cosmic rays have been positively correlated to the Earth's low cloud cover. But there is also evidence that electrically charged aerosols are more efficiently scavenged by cloud droplets, some of which evaporate, producing evaporation aerosol, which are very effective ice formation nuclei. So we learned from the cosmic rays about these particles, but we can do it now. The assumption is made that artificially generated corona effect ionization should act as much the same way, in much the same way as cosmic ray ionization, with some differences, and that's what we're doing. This is about aluminum, and I have, around the world, installations in service to the space fence are all digitally calibrated to one another. Digital wireless technology in an atmosphere constantly ionized by conductive metal nanoparticles is turning our soil alkaline and our oceans acid. The aluminum falling from the sky and being drilled into the earth is for military industrial intelligence agendas of control, not just weather. So here you see three things named. It's being used in spraying, And you look at the formula, and we don't have to have a chemistry course here to see that it's very similar in all three cases. For spraying, fracking, hydraulic fracturing, which is the main way that oil wells are now doing business, and sounding rockets. The sounding rockets blasting off into near-Earth orbit have the same chemical composition. And if you think this is simply an economic decision, you're wrong. This is actually exactly what they need in order to calibrate all of these instruments as one instrument of control. That's what it's primarily for. This is aluminum. You may have seen these fibers. I mean, we hear about it on the internet, on Facebook. The aluminum-coated nano-nylon fibers in rain samples. New ways of delivering the chemicals.
Okay, so this is a pretty darn serious clip. I hope you guys pass this around. People need to see what's going on. I was setting up my scope. Croat said, hey, look, there's an orb. And so manually I tried to get it in my scope's viewfinder, which is not an easy task. Anyhow, here's what I picked up. At first I thought it was an orb, and it's very difficult to operate the scope manually with no controls because everything's in reverse and you're kind of just swinging. You know, what you see is backwards to what you're doing. This is the object that I picked up. At first I thought, wow, finally we've got a telescope on an orb, but this is no orb.
Though it is probably made with plasma.
A lot of things that are bright like a welding arc. This thing was super, super white, but the sun is going down behind it. And what happened here was there was a chemtrail that it's going through now that had been laid, I don't know, 10 minutes prior, 15 minutes prior. It was already starting to widen out. And then there was a fresh chemtrail laid just over it. Now I assume this was dropped out of that chemtrail thing. I don't know where else it could have come from. The chemtrails were very low and close together. As you can see, it almost looks like it has a phase on it. I don't know whether it's the sun coming through this thing or what's going on. But as this thing began to drop, I noticed another thing. You can see the chemtrails are going to the left, and this round, I'll call it an orb, it's not an orb, is going to the right, almost like it's being controlled somehow. It's going against the breeze that's pushing the chemtrails to the left. Now, watch this clip until 3 minutes and 30 seconds. You have to see what happens here. This was done over solid houses, miles and miles of solid houses. And I tracked it all the way down to the roof of my house, blocked me from seeing any further. And I edited this down because I had 15 or 20 minutes worth of footage of this falling. But anyhow, in a second here, you're going to see what happens. Here it comes. Boom. And all this.
So,
So this is a pretty darn serious clip, I hope.
so what that is yes, it's an orb, it's a plasma orb, and it's being controlled by a guy on a laptop somewhere, would be my guess. And it is this is how it is possible that while there is a general delivery system via jet for, say, everyone in a region, there is also a subsidiary system, it appears, that can deliver particular chemicals to particular areas. And that, I believe that would be what that is. Now, regarding the orb situation, which most people immediately jump to the idea of UFOs, I don't think they're UFOs. I think that they are created, primarily. I don't know. Maybe some are from somewhere else, but certainly we have them. So here's an orb leading the chemical trails or perhaps accompanying them. Hard to say. Can you see that orb out there? Okay. So this is yet another facet of the delivery systems. Now here, it's just a patent that is recited, so we'll listen.
An aircraft comprised and a waveguide to direct ultrasonic waves at the exhaust plume to avoid the formation of contrails.
So what she's saying is invisible. They're invisible now. So I'm not sure when on our clear days, I'm not sure our clear days are clear. First of all, they're not really clear, but it could be that the invisible system is being utilized. Here is a chemical trail from a sounding rocket, and this is yet another delivery system, very important to know. Billy Hayes, the harp man, who's been invaluable to me as an advisor over these last few years, said that sounding rockets leave tons of aluminum oxide in their trail from rocket fuel. With every orbital launch, 20 to 120 tons of aluminum particulates are dumped with the exhaust plume into our upper atmosphere and into orbit, much of which eventually filters down. And it's not just aluminum, lithium's being used as well in these sounding rockets. Again, I remind you that these rockets, they go up to near-Earth orbit, and this chemical trail follows them up, and eventually those chemicals settle into the Saturn-like ring around the equator. Another delivery system, ship tracks. On Navy ships, merchant ships off the coast. They use these a lot in the diverting of weather systems from your state, from California, in the South Pacific. This is a very, very well used method of delivery. And partially it's this. You can see that this, what's called wet surface air cooler technology, WISAC, I think they call it. It's in power plants as well, but here it is. You can see what is on Navy ships and merchant ships, possibly. So by putting these water droplets in the air, then you have the matter around the dust and can produce more, and these can merge with the chemical trails coming down from above. Another delivery system, or perhaps I should say, this one I think is probably used in the guiding and shepherding of weather systems across the United States and other places. This is rainfall enhancement, private ionization companies who are in league with national security or federal operations. And let's see. Here's how it works. You see the ionizer producing charged particles into the desert air. Some go up, those are the negative ones, some go down, that's positive because the Earth is negative, so it's the positive are drawn to the Earth. And then the moisture condenses around the charged dust that eventually turns to cloud, and you produce rain. Another delivery system, I'm going to whip through all these because I don't want to spend time on them. I've spent a lot of time on them in the Space Fence book. NexRad, these are used to shepherd weather systems across the United States. Fracking, insertion of chemicals, I showed you the chemical formula before, into the Earth. The same chemical configuration as in the aerosols, so they can work together. You pulse the fracking well. At the same time, you're pulsing the wind turbines. At the same time, you're pulsing the NexRads. At the same time that you're pulsing perhaps even laser, delivering the weather system from the South Pacific. Everybody thinks these are green. I don't. If you go to one of these wind farms, you will not find one living animal or insect or creature anywhere near these turbines. Electromagnetic operations for plasma energy experiments. This is very, very important. I think they're thinking of using plasma as fuel, as a free energy, but only for the people that own the free energy, not for us, of course. And so they're producing a lot of plasma events in our atmosphere that many people don't know how to construe and are thinking might be UFO. They might think it might be this, that, or the other. But really what they mostly are Birkeland currents and Alvin waves, and then artificial production of plasma density, i.e. clouds. Some clouds being very, very thick and seeming to be actual bodies of clouds that bounce on the Earth. Predictive programming in Battleship 2012. Here you can see the rounding of that picture in the film. This is again the Tesla dome that we all live in. To run this Tesla dome, that is the Earth, not only do you need the space fence in near-Earth orbit and various ground instruments to keep it ionized, but you also need to control the poles. So yes, there is a lot of activity going on up in the North Pole and the South Pole, absolutely, and it's electromagnetic all the way. Methane release, we hear a lot about that, particularly in the Arctic Circle. Methane is interesting because they're going to also turn that into capitalism, into a moneymaker, and may already have done so. Let me see, I've got something else here. And this is a way they say that they destroy the methane and produce diamond dust out of it. I find that hard to believe. What you have here is a picture of how it's called interference technology, interferometry. It's a weapon, if you remember 9/11. I do believe it was used to bring the towers down. I'm not going to spend time today proving that, but I do discuss it in the opening preface to the Space Fence book. You basically produce 2 waves, possibly 3, and you hit the target area altogether at the same pulse frequency, and you have a very destructive force. This was Tesla's weapon of choice. Let's see. I wanted to say this. Anonymous posting to a Cloakcraft article by Jim Kerr, another guy I'm in touch with, about electric craft. And he maintains, as do many people, that we have electric craft now in the skies, UFOs, our own making. That, quote, only use small, highly efficient frozen methane gas generators to create the electricity to power the ion generators. Frozen methane gas is the most abundant power source on the planet. It is easily, safely stored and transported. A 2-foot square cube of frozen methane can provide enough fuel to power a craft for a week. Here is just a paper on scalar gravitational waves that I wanted to show. Some people think it's a conspiracy theory, scalar waves, scalar technology. It's no conspiracy theory. It's completely existing. This is from the Cornell University library, and it's a paper done by a Cornell, Cornell professor, student, I don't know what. Here is the NASA bragging about producing dense artificial plasma clouds in the upper atmosphere, stratosphere, but really they're producing them all the time down here because we are living in an ionized atmosphere. Most of the clouds you see daily, even the cumulus ones, some may have some moisture in them, but most of them are complete plasma. They're plasma clouds. They're dry clouds, plasma being the 4th state of matter. Here's tubes of plasma floating above the Earth. This was a photo taken. How's my time, Patrick? Okay. These tubes, they're quite extraordinary. This is a photo taken. I have no idea from what vantage point, done by a student, a young Chinese woman named Cleo Loy, using the Murchison Wide Field Array radio telescope to probe the magnetosphere. By splitting the observations between the eastern and western ends of the array, she achieved binocular vision, allowing us to see in 3 dimensions. So these plasma tubes, we actually have more on them. And here is looking up through one of those plasma tubes I just showed you at sunset. Imagine that. We're down here, we're looking up through a plasma tube at the sun going to the other side of the Earth. So Dr. Andrew Young, an astronomer, says 3 ducts. He too agrees with Ms. Loy. Notice the different levels at which there are intermittent green beads, I don't think we can see those, that come and go, especially toward the end of the video. The highest and lowest of these coincide with discontinuities in sky brightness, which suggests you're looking up through a duct at that level. All of the ducts are well above you, which makes it a little difficult to make sure exactly where they all are. But notice how many multiple images of the full sun there are. So you certainly have what the Russians call a novaya zemlya, sunset mirage. And as long as we're on this topic of mirages, let's take a look at this. You'll recognize it, those of you who frequent the internet. This is actually, people again thought it was a UFO. It's plasma frequency stepping, and in a way you're looking at some guy's laptop monitor. And the people who photographed it, well, somebody thinks it's an error on the part of whoever's laptop it was. And here's more, a plasma arc discharge. Richie from Boston. I like Richie.
Okay, so I've shown you this over and over and over and over and over again, and it still really hasn't gotten very much traction. The only thing that I've noticed is I'm getting videos and comments from people all over the world saying that the solar spraying of chemtrailing is worse than they've ever seen.
Since they started normalizing it.
It's absolutely insane here in the United States. It's horrible here in the Northeast. They haven't stopped. They haven't slowed down. It's actually just more. Every day when the sun's just about to go down, they come straight up and they do side-by-side chemtrails. It's just so blatantly obvious, and yet people still don't notice it. For instance, this is video I got yesterday, and if you look at these chemtrails, it's clearly obvious. This all came out of one plane, except one side is a long, stringy type of a filament that does not break down. The other 2 chemtrails turn into this gaseous or fluffy stuff. I don't know. It looks like spiderweb filament to me. You know that's why there's a sudden uptick in autism, Alzheimer's, and adult allergies. It's either you have allergies to specific things when you're a child or you don't. But have you noticed in the last 5 to 10 years, all of a sudden there's adult allergies and there's medication for all of them? It's all cause and effect. How's that video going on? Yeah, it's just pretty quick. Well, these guys from this brain, but I guess this guy's just gliding along. That's what that appears to be. But stick with me, because it's going to get better. I have unbelievable looking plasma, electrical, on fire thing falling out of the sky, and I'm wondering if that's what they're testing. They're filling the sky with plasma for one reason or another. A lot of people think they're terraforming the in it for other species that serves trying to unleash. I'm not exactly sure. This kind of stuff right here should shut people right down. This plane's leaving a fairly kind of normal chemtrail behind it, whilst flying next to an enormous chemtrail. But I mean, they're just absolutely killing us. This is spring, this is 2017, and solar shield is in full effect. It's still not the point of this video. Stand by. Watch this. This was sent to me by a subscriber. I cannot prove this to be phony. This appears to be legit, but what do I know? Whatever this is, there seems to be an electrical arc between it while it's flying through the sky. Apparently this was taken yesterday. What in the F is this? Do you see what I'm saying?
So that's a plasma arc.
Or far away where not a lot of people live, but apparently somebody had a cell phone camera or a video camera or one of the two, I don't know. But they're making the atmosphere entirely, completely electrically conductive. Aluminum, barium, strontium, yeah. And in the sky, the clouds look like plasma.
Okay, so that is the condition of the sky, but it's for a lot of things, and holography is one of them. So that's on the front of the plane. Okay, so now this is sculpting. This can happen.
And the second one is called Lester. They actually have a face inside of it. This is a NASA image from August 29, 2016. There's no Photoshop. You can check it out for yourself. Make sure your settings looks like this. Primarily that the corrected reflective true color is on. And this one, the corrected reflective true color water aqua is off. So here we go, it's August 29th picture, and we're going to zoom in on Hurricane Lester. You can see the eye clearly in the middle, but there's actually a face inside of the eye. There it is.
So again, this would be done with a laptop and an algorithm.
You can clearly see the right eye, left eye, the mouth. You can see the nose right here, nostril. You can see the hair, the ear, the hairline. This is the hair, all of this hairline. You can see the chin.
Okay? Then the simple stuff. And I could go into crop circles here too. I'm not going to, but crop circles too are done with algorithm and satellite and laptop. Huge electric currents. These are the Birkeland currents surrounding our planet, powered by solar wind and drawn through the ionosphere by Earth's magnetic field. Birkeland currents from another vantage point. Electrical. I'm just saying our planet is electrical. You know the wonderful site, the electric universe. Very good. Kinetic Alvin waves, plasma energy transporters. They're experimenting with all of these. They're making their own Birkeland currents. They're making their own Alvin waves. They're making their own lightning coming up from the Earth and going vertically to the sky, because our atmosphere is electric. I hate to keep belaboring the point, but I really want you to understand that so that you know what you're looking at. It's like a big lab in the sky, and we're part of it here on Earth. We're part of the same lab. Directed energy weapons. There's more predictive programming in Elysium. You see Chemtrail, they call the gun Chemtrail. You get it. This is from Rosalie Bertell, who has died, a great, great epidemiologist. The ability of the HARP Space Lab rocket combination to deliver very large amounts of energy comparable to a nuclear bomb anywhere on Earth via laser and particle beams is frightening. I am not worried about the nuclear bomb anymore. If you haven't read Bruce Cathy, you really should, and then you won't worry anymore either. But I am worried about directed energy weapons. There's what one looks like in Iraq when we went to war there. Afghanistan, I'm sure they had the same thing. Syria, I'm sure they have the same thing. We use wars abroad as places to experiment with our weapons. I recommend you go and see Jim Lee's fantastic interactive map about all the ionospheric heaters and laser installations and blah, 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 radar installations. It's a fantastic map. He's a real genius with the computer. Fiber optics cable all around the Earth, all the way across the oceans. A lot of people think fiber optics means everything's okay. No, it's a very good, it's been weaponized as well. There's one of the mobile HARPs, the ionospheric heater. Nave Spacecom, the space fence. This was the early space fence. Now it's later. Now we've developed it much further. SuperDarn is part of the space fence. All these installations, they're all part of the space fence, all part of the lockdown. Oh, there's a DOS. Okay, biological transhuman. This is the agency that you really need to look at. Forget the NSA. We already know about them. This one, I think, is in charge of a lot of devious AI-run stuff for planetary lockdown.
Pokemon Go.
Pokemon Go?
Mm-hmm. National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, they developed it.
Ah, interesting. Here's the public law that you need to know. You wonder, how can they do this to us? Well, it's legal. They can use us for research. This is the 5G. All I want to say about the 5G today is that don't think that it's just a little more than 4G. This is a creature of a very different composition. And it's, actually, I am interested. I think I put it up there. No, I didn't. Anthony Patch, who is sort of the go-to CERN guy, for me anyway. Anthony believes that 5G will be able to activate our internal nanobots, namely Morgellons, along with three-strand DNA with a quaternary signal. So that's Anthony. Ebner effect, electromagnetism, altering one species in one generation. There's Joni. Morgellons. Brad talked about Morgellons. Cross-domain bacteria, that's Clifford Carnicom's term for it, because it actually is composed of all three domains, natural domains of Earth life. I spent a week with Clifford last week in his lab looking at amazing stuff under 5,000 power spectroscope. And then this, you remember this, don't you? I mean, just to blow our minds. So the hubris is absolutely jaw-dropping. When you have to put your name on everything, so you get full credit for all the destruction you're doing. Okay, surveillance neural operations, again, dual use. Again, this agency is the one I will be looking at closely in the synthetic biology book. And here we are, the space fence watching over us. I feel so secure now.
There are millions of objects in space. Every time there's a launch to space or a collision in space, there's going to be extra objects up there. The primary purpose of the space fence system is to detect, track, and catalog these objects.
Not really, but
include non-operational satellites, as well as anything that was used to get the satellite up there. And then if you think about events from earlier 2009, with the collision of the Iridium and the Cosmos satellite, that added a bunch of space debris to the environment too. The first step of navigating through the space debris involves knowing which objects are of size that could actually harm your system.
This is true, but there's another aspect to this because a lot of sensors on a nanoscale have been released in space, trillions and trillions, and we've breathed those in too as they fall to Earth. But they do want to keep track of all the space sensors because that's information, that's data. They want to find out what it has in it. So in a way it's true, but it's not the whole story of the space fence at all. Again, I warned you, dual use. This is up there. This is the CATS. It's on the ISS, and that too. All these weather instruments will be used as surveillance, as control over planet Earth. There's GEMS. Those are the. I've got it down here. The MEMS are micro electromechanical sensors, and GEMS are global environmental MEMS sensors. And that is the quantum dots that we saw on the NASA insignia on the fiber. All these are used for information and data to control. And here is David Petraeus, who supposedly was fired because of his extramarital relationship, which is ridiculous. He says, he admits it, items of interest will be located, identified, monitored, and remotely controlled through technologies such as radio frequency identification, sensor networks, tiny embedded servers, and energy harvesters, all connected to the next generation internet using abundant, low-cost, and high-powered computing. Mind control, that will be in the synthetic biology book in spades. I won't do this because I think my time is running out, but this is where they're using, let me just show a little though. Again, pre-programming, they're using what I think is the space fence graphics to prepare us for our condition of lockdown. You might think it's CERN. I don't think it's CERN. I think it's what I said. But you've seen them. I don't know if they're still on because I don't have a TV, but you'd know if they still have the, right? They do? Okay.
They have internet channels now too.
Okay.
Most expensive, most audacious scientific experiment in history.
And in this one, what I say here is what you need to ask yourself when you see these fantastic news shows in which people are overpaid for lying and reading their cue cards. Are my perceptions being managed? Is my cognitive dissonance being managed? So this is about CERN. Again, this person who did the video thinks it's about CERN. I think it's about the space fence.
Subatomic particles called protons speed around the circuit. Powerful supermagnets pull them round faster and faster. 11,000 laps a second. travelling in opposite directions are steered into a collision. A collision that has happened since the beginning of the universe.
And CERN 2 is calibrated to work in concert with the other instruments of the space fence. Here we go. Programming. Ah, love those circles around the planet. So that's just to show you that's Ukrainian. That it's all over the world. This it's not just CBS, NBC, ABC in America. It's everywhere. Space fence. Space fence. Okay, that's probably enough. And then this, just to make clear that we're talking about brains here. So is that clear? Yes, this is about brain wave entrainment, or as Bernard Eastlund calls it, cyclotronic resonance. Okay, particle accelerator, the size of a piece of glitter, that's next. Right now we have CERN, next we're going to have glitter. I'm sure we already have it. And my last slide, thank you for being so patient. The greatest shortcoming of the human race is our inability to understand the exponential function. I think of this often. This is a challenge for us, but we can meet it. We just need to learn to read again, not just watch videos, and think. Thank you very much.
Great.